It's official. This First Berserker spear build is completely busted. Not only is the spear amazing, it has tons of great huge damage combos, but the armor set and all the gear pair perfectly with it to help us deal huge damage, max out our stamina recovery, and our health, and even give us tons of defense for amazing damage reduction. I gotta warn you, this spear build may just melt bosses' nuts off. That being said, let me show you how this is so OP. So ideally, the way this spear build works is we leverage a couple things. We leverage our Moonlight attack. Essentially, that third attack of a swift attack becomes a slashing attack, and that will be our Moonlight hit. Moonlight stance gives us bonuses via after image attacks, giving us more damage and letting us stay in that stance for 15 seconds when striking an enemy with Moonlight. Now, Moonlight has a ton of different benefits like Vitality, where you get extra stamina recovery rate, Full Moon, which upgrades our Potent Blow to be a massive damage and stamina damage dealing ability, Crimson Strike, which lets us chain and follow up a huge brutal attack with increased damage, things like Wrath for the Moonlight stance, which makes the remaining duration of our Moon stance for Full Moon and Crimson Strike get enhanced by the amount of time we have left, and then other abilities that actually enhance that time limit to again convert that to huge damage via Full Moon and Crimson Strike. We also take a lot of guarding abilities, since guarding abilities in this build give us huge buffs, as well as Phantom Heat Wave, where we can counterattack enemies at a non-stop rate, not only dealing massive damage, but also again buffing our effect durations, combining that with things like 0 Point, 4 quick attacks, and other chain options, allowing us to also chain that into Shadow Reversal, where we can deal a bunch of damage to an enemy, teleport behind them, and strike them from behind, and can overall let us do brutal attacks and things from behind easier, allowing us to max out our damage and max out our spirit recovery. So the idea is we proc our Moonlight, we enter Moonlight stance, and then we chain all of our abilities together to deal tons and tons of damage. The more Moonlight stance time we stack up, the higher damage we're going to be doing. First, we're going to talk about the gear. Now, there are two different sets that you can run that make this very, very good. The first set will be the Deep Shadow set. This set's going to give us tons of buffs specifically for the spear, as well as the best total defense of almost any set out there. Not only do you get the frontal assault damage for stamina damage increase, which we're primarily focusing on to exhaust enemies, but also the irregular damage increase for frontal assault as well. We also get guard penetration at 90%. We get damage increase for assault. You can use that skill if you decide to over Shadow Reversal, and after image thrust damage increase, which we're proccing non-stop while we're in Moonlight stance. Also, the spear itself, when upgraded, is very, very good as well. Keep in mind when you go to the blacksmith, whether you have to just find these pieces normally or not, you can actually craft this set once you unlock and find the recipe for it, and it actually only requires a regular crafting materials. Earlier on, I would recommend going for the Ashen Wolf set, as this gives us just a bunch of overall additional stamina increases, as well as a big damage increase to our Potent Blow. The other set ideally we would want is the Fallen Lord set. The problem with this is it does cost specific legendary materials to craft. You can actually buy these from Danjin, but this would ideally be one of our options as well, primarily because we get big charged attack damage increase, which gives us huge Full Moon damage, enemy exhausted increase, stamina recovery rate increase, which is great at 25%, and damage increase specifically to our Full Moon and Spiral Thrust if you choose to use that skill as well. Full Moon is one of our main damage dealers, so having the extra bump there is really, really good. Ideally, over time, you can aim for the Fallen Lord set, but the most accessible is Deep Shadow. Again, even it gives us tons of great defense as a base set, so this is what I typically would prefer to run with. Now, one thing we'll want to specifically focus on for our armor is making sure we change our attributes or augment our gear properly. The main things we want on this gear are very self-explanatory. So we want as much damage as possible on our spear, meaning we want damage increase, attack damage as a flat stat, and damage multiplier increase. Keep in mind your damage multiplier increase combines with your other damage multiplier bonuses to add up and give you a total percentage boost to your damage. The same basically goes for this damage increase percentage, and this flat damage gives you a bunch of overall flat damage, basically 10% free damage on your regular attack damage. Now for our helmet, you want max health, max stamina. You can take damage increase. Ideally, I would go for additional defense here to make your defense even more OP. And again, the same thing goes for the pauldrons. You can see I have max health, defense, and stamina recovery. You can take things like regular stamina there, as well as extra damage. You can see on our gloves, we took brutal attack damage increase, potent blow attack damage, and max stamina. Again, focusing on primary health and defense would be best. Our leggings have damage reduction, max health, and defense, like I mentioned. Our boots again have damage reduction, max stamina, and damage multiplier increase. And again, we're using the Necklace of the Blood Moon here. That way we can take advantage of the strategist set. So that way we get that 50% received damage decrease at 30%. That means we get a bunch of extra damage reduction, and we can take things like stamina and extra received damage decrease. The more received damage decrease you have, the more tankier your character is going to be. Again, we take the strategist ring to complete that set. In this, ideally you want to get defense or things like damage decrease or some stamina buffs if you happen to need them. Now, if we look at our statuses here, we can actually see we have received damage decrease at 10% and 50% received damage decrease at 30%. I believe that means we're reducing 50% of the damage that we take by 30%, meaning we're probably getting about a 10 to 15% damage reduction there, as well as the other 10.4% damage reduction, meaning we're really getting around 20 to 25%. And one of the things I also wanted to mention is our typical phantoms. Now, honestly, the best phantom abilities, in my opinion, are going to be Kesha the Unyielding for stamina recovery 30% bonus. That's a pretty big stamina recovery, and we can even get our stamina recovery up to around 170 or 200%. While using this, it makes boss fights and just fighting in general much easier because we're able to basically instantly replenish our stamina 2 times as fast. Now, specifically for fighting bosses, if you're struggling with the staying alive portion, the other one I would recommend is Adelheid. This is going to give you pretty big health recovery increase, and once you get this to level 20, it actually gives you a 20% health recovery increase, so you heal for a lot more healing. Additionally, you get decreased damage taken by 20% for 30 seconds when you heal using a netherworld energy, meaning you get an extra 20% damage reduction, which is huge. And you also get a netherworld energy for free if you don't have any left and hit an enemy with a brutal attack. So this is very healing based, but can definitely help you in the long run. Now again, our damage with the spear scales specifically with proficiency. So one thing I would try and definitely do is upgrade your proficiency above all of your other stats, primarily because it just does give us more overall damage for each upgrade for the spear itself. You additionally get stamina damage increase because I'll show you with our full moon attacks, we're able to basically delete enemy stamina bars, exhausting them extremely quickly. So getting more damage and more damage increase for the stamina damage on enemies will help us to pretty much just delete bosses as much as we can. Again, things like willpower also scale our spear, strength for help reducing our weight and our received stamina damage decrease. But again, vitality gives you tons of extra health, a little bump to our attack damage, a bonus to all of your resistances, which is actually pretty important, and weight bonus almost as much as strength does, meaning we can wear more armor and keep a much higher agility rating. Now again, here's the full stat tree, and I'll go over the early game setup before I show you how to just wreck bosses with this build. So if we were to reset these, essentially we'll leave these over here for now, but let's say we were essentially level 1. The very first thing you'd want to do is go ahead and get Moonlight up and activated, and then Moonlight Stance additionally, so that way you are able to actually enter Moonlight Stance. Then you want to put a point in Shadow Cleave, so that way you can use an additional strike with that third strike of Potent Blow. Now here you want to come back and actually maximize Moonlight Stance as much as possible, and then once you have that maxed out, take Shadow Reversal, while also then putting a point in 0 point so you can do those chain attacks that then bump into Shadow Reversal. Now once you unlock this third row of skills, ideally you want to take Full Moon first, Moonlight Stance Vitality, and then come over here and take 0 Point Fortress, then come over here and take Shadow Reversal Impact, and then spec out Full Moon with 2 more additional points. That way you can deal a bunch more damage in your Moonlight Stance. Keep in mind early on, at your discretion, eventually you want to put 3 points over here in Endurance and 1 point in Breakdown. It just depends when you do this. The earlier you do this, the easier it kind of makes the game because you decrease the stamina cost of guarding by a pretty decent amount. Now additionally, you want to put 1 point here in Phantom Heatwave. This is going to upgrade the Shockwave attacks of Moonlight and Full Moon for 30 seconds when you actually use this skill and counter an enemy. Eventually we'll want to upgrade this to 3, but once you unlock the next level of skills, you immediately want to take Crimson Strike. This will increase the damage of your brutal attacks while in your Moonlight Stance by a pretty good amount, and also chain from your Full Moon, meaning you can spam your Full Moon a couple times when the enemy's exhausted. Right before their bar goes down, you can then hit them with Crimson Strike for additional brutal attack damage. We also want to take Chase Devour here, so that way we gradually recover a spirit charge every time we exhaust an enemy, and Shadow Reversal Penetrate, so that way our Shadow Reversal actually deals guard penetration damage and increased stamina damage as well. Keep in mind, once we get 3 points in Phantom Heatwave, we also want to pick up Phantom Whirlwind. This means that you can keep the spear spinning for longer by consecutively casting this. And again, it increases our effect duration up to a maximum of 50 seconds. Now, eventually, once you unlock this 5th row, you want to take Moonlight Stance Wrath. That's going to enhance your attacks of Crimson Strike and Full Moon depending on the remaining duration of Moonlight Stance, and our goal is to make the remaining duration essentially be as much as possible, so that way when we do cast Full Moon or Crimson Strike, we're dealing tons and tons of damage. We also want to take Moonlight Stance Persistence. That way if we perform a Brink Guard or Brink Dodge, it'll actually increase our Moonlight Stance's duration by 3 seconds, which again is upping that counter for more damage. Now here's where you can kind of choose when you take things. That way when you actually cast Phantom Heatwave and you do block an enemy's attack with a Brink Guard, during the middle of your weapon spinning, you can actually hit square to perform a quick slash on the enemy, and that slash on the enemy will actually trigger that additional duration buff for 20 seconds. But then we want to use our other 3 skills here to take Moonlight Step, and then take Moonlight Step Intercept and Moonlight Step After Image. That way we can max out our movement while in Moonlight Step and get a bunch of additional bonuses and extra invincibility time from it. Keep in mind again our common skills as you'll place them kind of while you're playing, which I would take early are Indomitable Spirit, Berserk Spirit, Brutal Attack Execution, Brutal Attack Reap, Brutal Attack Absorb, 2 points early in Counterattack Offense because it's the most damaging and arguably one of the best skills in the game. And now it's time to show you how to demolish enemies. Ideally, the first combo we're going to be using is our 3-combo Swift Attack. Essentially, you have to hit that 3rd Swift Attack in order for it to count as a Moonlight Attack. Once you hit that 3rd attack, you officially will enter Moonlight Stance, and that will be shown at the bottom via a new little icon that you get showing that your Moonlight Stance countdown timer is going. Once you're in Moonlight Stance, that means our bonus is essentially buffed. Now, once we've entered Moonlight Stance, the first big combo we're kind of going to work to do is triangle, square, and then triangle, triangle. What this is our Potent Blow followed by our 0-point Quick Thrust into another Potent Blow into a Shadow Reversal, which you then essentially go right through an enemy. Now our other big attack again is once we enter Moonlight Stance, we can then immediately charge our Full Moon Potent Blow attack, and it basically deletes enemy stamina. Keep in mind, while the enemy's exhaustion meter is going down, you can continually get off more Full Moon attacks before you actually trigger that brutal attack on enemies. Again, we're going to enter Moonlight Stance, we're going to charge up our Full Moon, hit the enemy, and it's going to just drain their stamina, and we can just continue to cast Full Moon and then even hit another one here once our stamina regenerates again, and then jump right into a brutal attack and basically give the enemy no time to move or think in a lot of cases where you can actually get the right amount of stamina so you can spam this pretty consistently. Now keep in mind, when we do perform a Brink Guard or a Brink Dodge with our skills, this will actually up our meter for how long we're able to actually be in Moonlight Stance. If we hit that Moonlight attack again or that 3rd attack of a Swift, we actually regenerate our Moonlight Stance meter all the way, meaning it's basically restarted. We get a complete refresh of our damage bonuses. One thing to keep in mind though is after each brutal attack, it will automatically clear your Moonlight Stance for you by default, so you actually need to go into Moonlight Stance again. So to give you an example here, we're going to try and exhaust this enemy with charging our Full Moon attacks. You can see we can get off another one here because we have a little bit more time on the meter, and then we're going to do a brutal attack on the enemy, and that then gets rid of our Moonlight Stance, meaning that we actually have to trigger it again. Now keep in mind, another cool thing with our buff here, or just in terms of defense, is we can actually use our Spirit skill to deflect enemies' attacks for free and basically hold it down and keep casting it over and over and over again. Again, by hitting that attack and casting it a second consecutive time, we're getting that big bonus to our additional buffs that you can see down again at the bottom. Keep in mind, with our final upgrade of this, you can also get this by actually blocking and then doing a counter attack straight out of it, which will then give us that max bonus we can again see at the bottom. If you combine that bonus with being in your Moonlight Stance, that'll basically mean you're doing a significant amount of damage, literally draining enemy stamina bars in one single shot with all those buffs. So again, the key is to always stay in Moonlight Stance, block those attacks with your Spirit ability to get the extra buffs, do your 0-point Shadow Reversal chains to get behind enemies, and when you have openings, once you're in Moonlight Stance, spam Full Moon on the enemy to just absolutely deplete their stamina bar out of existence. Also, once you unlock your Phantom meter, keep in mind we're using that primarily for if you get in trouble. So if you get in low health or run out of potions or something like that, you can always enter your Phantom meter to do a bunch of damage to enemies around you, but also get out of some sticky situations. If you follow that whole guide, you will be destroying every enemy in this game, especially the bosses in the First Berserker Khazan, but make sure you don't miss out on these tips that you need to know.